Hello everyone. I've been asked just to come in today and just speak to everyone a bit about placement years and maybe the opportunity of taking one. I'm not sure if anyone's considered it yet, but I was now a third year student. I took a placement year last year, so Bev and a couple of lecturers just thought it'd be a good idea for me to come in and just speak to you about my experience and maybe get the ball rolling for yourselves. So my name's Jack Collins. I've got my email address down there if anybody did want to send me some emails afterwards with any questions about experiences or anything like that. I'm more than welcome to. So a bit of background about myself. So like I say, I'm a final year student now. I study BSc Business Finance. I went on a placement year for a company called Portofino Investment Management Limited. And this company basically specialises in financial advice and they deal more with pension transfers. So within the company, I worked for the analysis department, and within that, it's quite calculation based. So I was just producing a lot of reports in line with FCA requirements. So depending on sort of what industry you're looking to go into, most companies are going to be regulated by some sort of regulator. So I was with the FCA, and you have to work very closely with their guidance to ensure that you're being compliant in everything you do. So a lot of the responsibilities I have now, I'm more of a sort of support member for the team. So I deal with a lot of the quality assessment for the rest of the team. So I'll check over their reports, make sure everything's been done correctly. I deal with a lot of guides. So I write a lot of new processes and stuff like that for the rest of the team. And I deal with a lot of sort of training and development, whether that's within my team or different departments as well. So quite a sort of broad range of responsibilities, which is definitely a good thing just to be able to add onto your CV as well. So we've actually undertaken the placement year, so a bit of inspiration behind it. For me, one of the main things was just adding some work experience to my CV. So it was a bit daunting for myself, thinking that I'm going to be finishing up university in next year's time, and the only work experience I'd really had was working for doing sort of telesales when I was 16 and working in a couple of pubs, and I just didn't feel too relevant to what the field I wanted to go into. And securing a placement year can be a lot easier than a graduate role. So I just thought it was a good way to get some relevant experience to put onto my CV. So another thing is just a sense of direction as well. So I didn't really know what field I wanted to go into. I knew it was probably something finance related, but obviously there's a lot of different areas you can work in. One of the good things about a placement year is you do get to work within a lot of different teams. So I did manage to work for sort of 4 or 5 different teams, and I found my feet on the analysis department and realised that's what I liked. So that's one of the good things about it as well. Skills and competencies within the industry. So like I say, I didn't have much experience before, and I just needed something that I could really draw on within that interview process. So placement year is a great way to do that, of course. And also a talk from an ex-Aber student. So I did have a similar talk to the one I'm sort of given now, and that was a bit of inspiration for myself, where it kind of drew out on a lot of the skills that you gain in a placement year, which I wasn't sure if it would be too applicable for myself. One of the things, well, a few things that were kind of putting me off doing a placement year, I put down here, so losing my friends that I've sort of had in university. So it's obviously quite a big concern. You're moving away, maybe not everyone else is going to be undertaking a placement year. But one of the actual things about it is you gain a lot more friends from the work you're actually doing. So you work meeting a lot more people. One of my friends who completed a placement year also stayed in a shared house. So she was in Shrewsbury, and she's still in contact with a lot of them now. So she's made a lot more friends through that. And of course, your friends that don't undertake a placement year, they're still going to be here as well. So you can quite easily come back and come and see them. And it gives you a chance actually to travel around a bit. So I had friends that were doing placement years all around the country. I had one in Germany as well, so I did travel around. I saw all of them. I went out to Germany for a week or so, and I obviously came back to Aber as well. So it wasn't about sort of losing friends for me as much. I actually just gained a lot more and realised that I still had these ones here. Living arrangements after completing the placement year as well. So it was a bit of a worry that I'd come back and sort of all my friends would now finish. So where was I going to live? There is, of course, the option of going into halls. One of the things that I realised was actually there's a lot of courses where a placement year is compulsory. So comp sci, some of the sciences, languages, they all have a compulsory year. So if you've got some friends in these departments, it's a great way to just speak to them and say, well, we're all coming back at the same time after a year out. Why not get a house together? And that's what some of me and my friends done. So there's always sort of options available in that sense. One of the worries as well is just the sort of job that you're actually going to be doing. So what I'd heard a lot about was just that you're going to go into a placement year and you're just going to be sort of filing paperwork for a year, and it's going to be pretty dull and you're going to get pretty much the rubbish stuff. But as you can see from all the tasks that I sort of complete on a daily basis, it was far from that. It was a really submersive experience, and I basically was just treated as a normal employee. It wasn't like you're underneath anyone because you're a placement year. It was you gaining all the skills and you're completing all the tasks that every normal member is as well. So, okay. So, with the application process, there are a few different ways that you can do it. Recruitment sites is probably the most popular one. So, obviously, you've got Indeed and Reed and things like that. Job adverts are going to be constantly posted on these things, and at first, obviously, it's just the CV, cover letter, and then aptitude tests or psychometric tests. Careers counsellors have booklets of examples with these tests. I remember picking one up in second year, and that was actually really helpful just to get an idea of what these questions ask, because if you're not prepared for them, you haven't seen them before, it can be a bit difficult at first, but really great to go and get some of these examples from the Career Centre. They'll probably help you out quite a lot. With the actual process of that, I've went through some of them, and I did get my CV checked over by the careers counsellors, and I went over and I had some mock interviews as well. So I'm not sure if any of you guys have gone through any competency questions before. This is one of the big things in the interview process, and without sort of going to the careers counsellors and having those mock interviews, I really just wasn't aware of what or how I should be structuring my answers for these, because there is quite a specific way to tailor your answers to these questions. With myself, actually, I was going through this process and I had a few interviews lined up, and my brother sort of had a client who was the managing director of this firm. He sent him an email. He said, well, let's get him in for an interview. So I ended up going for that role instead. And it's actually quite common to do that. I mean, it doesn't have to be someone you know that owns the company, just any sort of connection can always just get you into the door a lot easier. And it's a great way to just sort of utilise your resources, really. It can be a much easier process, if I'm honest. I didn't have to go through as much of a strenuous process as a lot of other people. So if you know of anyone who's within a company that may be able to facilitate something like that, I'd definitely advise just trying to utilise that. With deadlines as well, so job adverts, they'll normally have a deadline, but once they've received sort of enough applications, they'll just close it to new applicants. So it's normally going to be before the deadline actually comes, which can be quite frustrating if you're working towards that deadline as your sort of final goal. So I would say just to try and always go a week, 2 weeks before that deadline, just to secure your position. With actually applying for them as well, so I know probably some people think it might be a bit late, but I didn't actually start applying for mine until about May time, during my exams and then after my exams. And I didn't actually secure one until it was pretty late in June as well. And there was still loads of them in abundance I could apply for, so it's definitely not too late. And the process itself is normally about 4 to 6 weeks, I think, on average. So you can still secure one, and the university will help you out with everything as well. All I had to do was just send an email, and they sorted out all my student finance and was in contact with me throughout the whole year, just with everything that was going on. And you won't have to pay any tuition fees, of course, if you do a placement year for that year. Just worth noting. So what I gained most from actually doing the placement year, one of the things which I think is sort of undervalued a bit is just office acclimatization. So being able to be a bit more professional, whether that's with emails. At first, you're not quite sure how to respond to emails. There's always formal, informal ones, and it's a bit different from just sort of emailing lecturers. It's quite daunting at first, to be honest, but it's good to just get used to how you should be replying to people within the workplace. Prioritising work and time management, of course. So when you're at work, you're obviously just going to keep getting bombarded with more things that you need to do, and it's just a case of prioritising them. You're not always going to be able to get everything done in the same day. So it's just what needs to be done immediately, what can I leave for tomorrow, and then ensure that I've got my diary ready, that I know what I'm working through first thing in the morning. Plan post-uni, so I touched on this a bit before about not having a sort of sense of direction. So when I worked within the company, obviously I found out I quite liked the analysis role. And then from that, I've been able to sort of develop a sort of career path that I want to go into. I know what I want to study now, so I'm going to go back and do a master's to get to the sort of job level that I want to go into. But without sort of undertaking this placement year, I would never have known that this is the route that I wanted to go down at all. So it's a good way just to find out what you like, what you dislike, and what you want to do with your life, really. Teamwork, of course, this does get developed more, I think, in some different degrees. With my degree, there wasn't much sort of group work, but even when there is, it's not quite the same as the sort of group work you're doing in the workplace. So every single day you're going to be working with your team, and you're going to be supervised by your manager as well. So developing that way of working in a group under a professional manner, I think it's just a really important skill that doesn't really get developed until you're thrown into subject matter for graduate applications as well. So, and this is a really important one with those sort of competency questions. So being able to relate answers back to something you've done within the actual industry instead of, like for me, just working in a bar or something. I didn't have anything really that I could draw on that was too relevant to the person I was talking to or the industry I was trying to go into. Whereas now I feel I've got answers for every single competency question that could come up, and I can relate it back to the same industry, which is pretty good, to be honest. It just puts you above other people that maybe haven't worked within the industry before. Qualifications as well. So obviously it depends what sort of industry you're looking to go into, but most companies will have an accrediting body which the higher up people in the company are working towards completing exams for. Placement years aren't typically allowed to gain these qualifications, but I said to them that I'd fund everything myself. I wanted to just sit some exams, so I then became partway qualified to being a financial advisor as well throughout the year, which is just even more to put on my CV, and just helps you out really with graduate jobs. It puts you one step ahead of everyone else. So further employment as well. This is probably going to, I think, be a bit more normal now. So now that companies have got the resources and they've put the systems in place to allow people to work from home just from COVID. So I started working part-time when I came back to university. The company said, well, you're set up to work from home. Why not just take your computer with you and just sign on whenever you can? So obviously I can earn a lot more money than I could on any other sort of job in university, really. And I can fit it around everything. So it's very nice. And I think that's probably going to be a bit more of a normal thing as time progresses now, with companies having those systems in place. And of course, a secure job to return to as well. So the job market itself now is nowhere near what it used to be, really. There's not a lot of jobs around at the moment. So securing a placement, if you do a good job 9 times out of 10, the company's going to want you to go back when you graduate, and they're going to have a secure job for you lined up. And to have that worry alleviated, really, when you come to your final year and you're writing your dissertation and exams and stuff, it's good to just not have to worry about anything job application wise or anything like that, because you've got something to go back to. Corporate sponsorship as well. So if any of you are thinking about doing a master's, it's a good way to obtain some funding, because master's programs are very expensive, as if anyone's looked into them will probably know. And one of the things that I've now done with my company is I've said to them, well, I'd like to come back and work with you, but I want to do my master's first. And now the company's happy to fund it, so they'll pay for my tuition, and I'm just going to go back afterwards for a set amount of years, sort of thing. Obviously, if you've got enough money anyway, that's great, but they're quite expensive. It's a good way just to get in there and get some money from a different resource, which wouldn't be available if you didn't have that connection to the company already. Got one more slide as well, it's just for Bev Herring, who's the careers counsellor. So if you had any questions about just sort of setting up a placement year, any guidance on what to do, sort of interviews, application processes, then this is her contact details, and she's helped me out a lot throughout the job application process and also sort of master's applications and things like that, just tailoring yourself to all these applications. So if you're thinking about any of that, definitely get in contact with her. And I think that's everything that I wanted to go through with you today. So thank you very much for listening to me. And if anyone's got any questions, please feel free to either ask them now, or if you want to send me over an email of anything, that's absolutely fine.